What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor Season 40 Winners at War for the last time. How sad. It's literally been a year of us talking about this awesome season of Survivor. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and I've seen this said on social media and stuff, but this really feels like the end of an era of Survivor. And I feel like that's even more true since season 41 hasn't started filming yet. We don't know when we're gonna get it. So this feels like a very final end. And I feel like we can talk about whether or not we think it's a fitting end of this era of Survivor, but it felt like a really good uh, ending point, especially if you've seen the videos on Survivor CBS on YouTube, the Ponderosa videos. It felt like a lot of people got the closure they needed on their Survivor journey, and it's like we're going to be saying goodbye to a lot of Survivor greats. So kind of
Yeah.
bittersweet, I think.
It's honestly sort of really crazy to think about, I feel like, because personally, I remember getting back into Survivor during Kagayan, so Tony's season that he won the first time, and as a plebeian Survivor watcher, when Wu picked Tony to go to the end and then Tony won, I was honestly sort of upset. And so it's so crazy how now, 7 years later, Tony wins season 40, and this is the cap of this whole era of Survivor. And if Wu didn't bring Tony to the end in Kagayan, Tony would not be on Survivor season 40. So I just think it's
Unless
so
he won
crazy.
Game Changers.
Yeah, but then maybe he wouldn't have even been invited back to Game Changers, but he probably would have if he was the final three loser or voted out at final three, so that loser spot. But then I don't know. It's just such a ripple effect. Tony being cast for Game Changers is probably the only reason that Sarah was cast for Game Changers, to have that rivalry similar to in Heroes versus Villains with Sugar and Randy. People are cast to have that juxtaposition and to have that feud. And so if that didn't happen, Sarah wouldn't have won, and then we wouldn't have had both of them on this season, and then to have this finale. And I just think it's so crazy that Alyssa and I started podcasting about Survivor after during Second Chance. So we started that season in junior year of high school. So now 6 years later, we are going to graduate college, and I don't know, it's just a lot of things that are happening, and it's just so full circle.
Yeah, everything feels very full circle. And I feel like I talked about how everyone's arcs, with Survivor, were mostly ending. And I feel like that's definitely true also with Tony. I feel like the fact that he won again made sense story wise because his whole story this season was about his game and about winning. And I feel like a lot of the other players on this season had story arcs related to more personal things. Especially the more controversial winners, a lot of them were seeking like absolution basically. I deserve to win this game of Survivor the first time I played it. And I think that so many people having personal storylines and then Tony's storyline being almost entirely focused on the game makes it make a lot of sense that he was the one who won the game, I think.
Yeah, and I think it really goes to show Tony and Sarah's relationship, which we'll definitely get into. And honestly, going into the finale, even last week when we were podcasting, predicting about the finale, I think both of us were on the same page, sort of that yeah, we would accept one of the other final five, final six winning Survivor under certain circumstances, depending on who the final three is. But I don't know. Last night was such a roller coaster of emotions. Things did not turn out how we thought they were going to turn out. We thought Tony would have a straightforward ride to the end, but that is not how it happened. And I'm just so thankful that Tony did make it to the end, because like Alyssa was saying, if Tony was the final four robbed goddess or fallen angel archetype person, then I feel like it just would have been something missing, because Tony's whole relationship was with Cops R Us. Maybe he could have been the Sarah and then gotten out at Fire, and then that would be the end to his story. But I just, felt it in my heart that Tony needs to win this to have that storybook ending. Like, this was Tony's story, and we needed that closure for him to win this season.
Yeah, and I feel like I definitely would have been okay with other people winning, but Rachel was very much on the Tony train. And I think a lot of people expressed the notion that they would have been upset if Natalie won because Natalie came back from Edge, and it seems wrong to have the first person voted out then become the winner of the game. So I don't know. I was kind of upset that Natalie got 4 votes, not because I don't think she deserved the 4 votes that she got, but because Michelle got 0 votes. And I feel like none of the final 3 deserve to be a 0 vote finalist.
Yeah, Alyssa and I were texting during the finale, and basically, like, the final 3, all of them deserved to be there. All of them played different games, but they all played some sort of game. So we're not discrediting any of the final 3. Like, they literally all deserve to be there and all played really good, but different games. I think it's just the fact that, like, I don't know. I feel like, personally, with the Edge of Extinction this season, having Natalie come back at Final 6 with an idol, same thing like in season 38 with Edge of Extinction, it's just too much power. And then to see the Edge of Extinction returnee be able to create so much havoc that it would have totally screwed up Tony's game, and Tony could have went home, Final 5, Final 4 fire making, when previously, before the Edge of Extinction person came back in, we all thought that, like, oh yeah, Tony, Sarah, Ben are for freaking sure getting to the final 3 because they are so tight and no one is able to pull a move against them because those 3 are so tight. So it just frustrates me, I think, a little bit that someone can come in so close to the end of the game and then create so much chaos that you could potentially change, like, all of the work that Tony and Sarah and Ben were building up through those, 34 days of the game when Natalie came back in. I just am a little frustrated with that. But you can also say that, like, the Edge of Extinction is part of the game this season, and you have to go with the flow. And if you are a good Survivor player, you can adapt and you can still make it to the end of the game, even with the Edge person coming back in. But I just think the Edge of Extinction should have been at Final 8, or maybe 2 people come back at the merge, not someone coming back at Final 5, Final 6.
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of thing where I feel like we're not opposed to Edge as an entire concept, but like the execution of Edge makes it very difficult to enjoy it. And I think it's also kind of difficult for the people playing because they have to be in the game for so long, even after they're voted out. And it's like, it seemed to make the last couple days at Ponderosa like really fun because everyone had already like worked through everything that they needed to work through, basically. But also, I feel like it's different. And I think at this point, part of the good thing about Survivor is it's the players that make it really interesting and not like constantly adding new fun twists or formulas. And I think it's like if you get a good batch of like 20 good players, then it shouldn't matter if there's Edge of Extinction, or it shouldn't matter if there's a bajillion idols hidden or 1,000 different advantages. And I think that like part of the frustration with Edge of Extinction is the fact that it seems like just another gimmick when this cast could have stood up on their own and played amazing games without all of the extra Edge stuff.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like if CBS wants to do some kind of battle back like this, maybe you bring back Redemption Island or that kind of twist, because at least that is more fair and you're doing challenges every day. So it favors the people who were voted out later in the game, that you have to do less challenges until you can get back into the game, versus favoring like the first person that was voted off of the game because they have more opportunities to find advantages or clues or do something on the Edge of Extinction. So I just think there is a flaw with Edge, and it's something that producers need to be thinking about if they are going to keep doing it, which it seems like Jeff Probst isn't going to keep doing it after all of the backlash. But I just think it was just so, I don't know, nerve-wracking to see like Natalie be able to dismantle that whole alliance, which is like, okay, great, like good gameplay, but being safe at Final 6, Final 5, Final 4, it's such an easy path to the end when you come back in at Final 6, especially coming in having been on Edge of Extinction the entire time, where I think I would argue that like in the game, you are stressed because you're constantly having to vote people out versus when you're on the edge of extinction. I think that paranoia is lessened, which obviously Alyssa and I haven't played the game, but that seems to be the common sentiment about in-game versus as an edge of extinction. And so I don't know. I just think it's two separate games, and it just sort of sucks that Michelle is getting 0 votes at the final tribal council, even though she definitely isn't a GOAT by all means.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that Rachel and I want to talk about in a separate video is gender bias in Survivor. We heard this kind of touched on by Sarah in the finale episode, and I feel like you can kind of talk about that as the reason why Michelle got 0 votes, because Michelle played such a different game than Tony, and it seems like the bias in Survivor is towards the kind of game that Tony plays, which is the really loud, flashy game, instead of a game like Michelle's, where she was like constantly really strong with like 1 or 2 other people, made a lot of really amazing bonds, and then like never really had enough leverage to get places. And so I think like I don't know. I think you can definitely talk about like the reason Michelle got 0 votes versus Tony getting 12, and then just the fact that Tony also was one of the people to really popularize the idea of like resume building, big moves, blah blah blah. Like I think all of that kind of comes together to paint an interesting story of gender bias in Survivor, which we aren't going to get into now. But Tony winning also means that this is the 6th season in a row that has been won by a male player. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think next week we'll probably be doing the gender bias video. The statistics on like the male to female ratio after season 25 are astounding. With after 25, there's only 3 female winners, and then the rest are all men. So just with that many seasons, 3 out of 15 is way smaller, when before season 25 it was like 13-12, so pretty even male versus female split. And I think it was really interesting. A lot of the after the finale interviews were saying that 4 people were actually considering to vote Michelle in Danny, Wendell, Nick, and Adam. They were actually going or thinking about voting Michelle at Final Tribal Council, but then they were scared that if those 4 voted Michelle, that it would split the votes from Tony, and then Tony might actually lose the game, and then Natalie somehow gets enough votes to win, which I think that was such an interesting argument, that even if like someone like Adam really thought that Michelle deserved to win, they still voted for Tony because they wanted to cement Tony's win, which I don't know. I think that's super fascinating because it's like you're voting for the person you think most deserves to win, but also in this kind of final 3 scenario, they were also juggling, oh, we don't want this other person to win, so I need to move my vote to make sure that this person who is deserving, but also I would low-key want to vote for this other person who I think is deserving. But I could see it happening, you know, if 4 people did vote for Michelle, it would be an 8-4-4, and maybe 2 people flip off of Tony and vote for Natalie, and then somehow it's a 6-6.
Yeah, and so I think the people Natalie thought might have voted for her, who ended up voting for Tony, were Danny, Amber, and Kim and Sophie. I think she said she had a chance of getting all 4 of those people to vote for her. And so if you're like 50-50 on 4 people, I think it would be right to assume that maybe they would vote for Natalie instead of Tony. But yeah, I think one of the things also with the Edge being flawed is the fact that like the Edge game that you play as far as jury management is so different, because it's like some of the people who voted for Natalie voted for her because they were really close to her on Edge. And it's like voting for someone because they had a strong social game on Edge seems different than voting for someone because they had a strong social game like in the game. And I think also a lot of people talked about how Edge was like their time to process and heal from like what had happened in the game. And then people were still holding it against Natalie if she needed time on her own on the Edge, which I think it's like you can't both say that like, oh, you still need to be playing a social game on Edge and also saying Edge is for you to heal from what happened to you in the game. So I feel like Rob's whole comment about like, oh, you were alienating people on the Edge, when Natalie was just like, yeah, I needed to be able to get back into a headspace where I could play the game if I got back into the game. Like that seems kind of at odds with each other, I guess we could say.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the stakes of the social game in game and then the stakes of the social game on Edge of Extinction are two completely different things, because on Edge you aren't having to backstab people or vote people out. And I do think it's weird that, people like Rob took offense to Natalie hiding her secrets or maybe not sharing peanut butter and doing these advantages and sending stuff into the game without telling everyone else on the Edge of Extinction. So I think it does go to show like these people become super, super close, that if you're offended that someone is not sharing that they have a hidden immunity idol, or they found a clue for an extortion advantage or whatever, then like in the game you wouldn't fault someone for maybe not telling you that they have an idol or something, unless you think that you're super close and then you are offended that they didn't tell you because you thought they trusted you, which I guess you can see parallels to the Edge of Extinction. I just think something is wrong with the Edge that like Natalie can go canoodle with people for whatever 34 33 days out there and then be able to hang out with the jury, not like in a Ponderosa setting where all of you are voted out of the game, but in a setting where like some of the people on this jury, this 16-person massive jury, did not ever meet Tony. And so like Ethan was saying in post-game press that he was voting Natalie, obviously, because they bonded out there. Same with Tyson on Twitter. Tyson said that he voted for Natalie because why would you give $2 million to an acquaintance, someone that you didn't really know, in referring to Tony. So I think like preseason, Alyssa and I said that Final Tribal Council would come down to a popularity contest with all winners. They have so many pre-existing relationships, but I just think that like if you're able to create and become the most popular person on the island because you canoodle with the whole jury on Edge, like something is sort of flawed with that you can get votes just because Tony didn't have the opportunity to meet some of these people.
It's already flawed because Tony knew some of these people before the game started and Michelle didn't. And I think that's also kind of a flaw with the way Final 3 is, because it's like before the game started, Tony had a really strong pre-game alliance in Sarah. And I think that like that never really was brought up in the Final Tribal Council that we saw. Like Michelle did kind of say, like, I didn't have a lot of strong existing relationships coming into the game, but no one ever really said, yeah, Tony already came into this game with one ride or die ally, and that really changes the way you play the game. So I wish that had been mentioned, because I think it deserved to be mentioned, because a lot of the reason I think that Tony was so successful was because he had a right-hand person that he could trust the entire time. And I think that like people talk a lot about how like Sarah, there was this perception that Sarah was Tony's underling. And it's like, would Tony still have been able to do everything he did without Sarah? Maybe not. And the fact that he had Sarah before this game started, he didn't need to make that relationship in the game. He already had that relationship. Like he's already starting a step or two ahead. And so I don't know.
I think you can also make that argument though with like Boston Rob and Amber, obviously, but also someone like Jeremy and Natalie also coming in as a really tight duo. So I think like trying to judge who has better pre-existing relationships or more pre-existing relationships sort of becomes circular because everyone out here has at least maybe one friend, unless maybe you're Denise and you've totally like dropped off the grid and you're not going to the Survivor functions and stuff like that. So I think it's sort of hard to compare who has the pre-existing relationships if we wanted
I feel like with the final 3, though, it was pretty obvious. Michelle's only pre-existing relationship was her ex-boyfriend she split on bad terms with. Tony's pre-existing relationship is someone he's played the game with 2 times already.
Which, yeah, I think that goes to show, like, all of the other duos, pairs, whatever, got voted out, and Tony and Sarah, with their social game, with their strategic game, were able to make it to the end as a duo, and maybe that is helped by the fact that they started on the same tribe. So maybe if, like, Natalie and Jeremy didn't start on the same tribe and Sarah and Tony didn't start on the same tribe, and like maybe the men were flipped or maybe the women were flipped on there so they didn't start together, that would be really interesting because then maybe Natalie isn't voted out first because her and Jeremy aren't seen as a power couple. Maybe if Sarah and Tony aren't together, maybe they don't do as well because they aren't together. So I think it is really interesting in how the tribe started out, and I would want to know like why 2 big pairings were starting on the same tribes together when like Rob and Amber were obviously going to be split up.
Yeah, like it seems like they should have either made an effort to split up all of the big pairings or made an effort to put them all together. And I guess part of that could be if you consider Jeremy, Natalie, Rob, Amber, and then Sarah, Tony to be the 3 big pairs that came into the game, there's no way to put an equal amount of pairs on both tribes. So it's like if you had 2 pairs on one tribe and 1 pair on the other, the pair that was on the tribe with the other pair would have an advantage because it would just be saying, oh, they're more of a threat than I am, instead of saying we're not a threat. So maybe that was their reasoning. I think that like with a game where people already know each other, you need to put a lot of care into the starting tribes in order to be able to make it as unbiased as possible. And I'm not sure they put the appropriate amount of care in. So
maybe, after Game Changers, when Tony gets ousted early and they wanted to see the Sarah Tony duo alliance either butt heads or come together and create the magical Cops Are Us that we saw this season, maybe they put them on the same tribe so they would have to at least get some footage of them two either working together or fighting or not being able to align if they did start on the same tribe. So I don't know. I just think that's like super interesting. Obviously, kudos to Tony and Sarah for somehow not getting a target on their back or getting voted out until the end of the game, even though Sarah was like the person with the most amount of people wanting to vote her out first based off of like the sheet of paper interviews where people would write the name of the person that they wanted to vote out first. Sarah's name came up a hella lot. And I think even preseason, Alyssa and I were like, oh yeah, Sarah's probably going to be the first boot. But she, her and Tony made it to the end. So I think that is a huge testament. And especially them winning immunities early on probably helped them, because I think if if that red tribe lost at the beginning, you'd probably vote out Amber, Tyson, and then maybe you vote out Tony or Sarah or Sandra there, but they only went to 2 tribal councils before the tribe swap. So I think definitely, like everyone says, Survivor is played with a lot of luck, and Tony and Sarah did a great job playing within the luck. Same with Michelle, though. Everyone in the finale did an amazing job playing with the hands that they were dealt to make it that far in the game.
Yeah. I think one thing that disappointed me about this episode also was how little Denise we got this episode. Rachel texted me because, like we said, we were texting during the finale, and she's like, Denise has still gotten 0 confessionals. They walk into the challenge, and Denise says something like, oh, this looks like fun. And I texted Rachel jokingly, like, haha, Denise gets out because she says the challenge looks fun. And then basically that's what happened. So I don't know. I feel like, especially since they took an hour away from the reunion show in order to make this season finale longer, like, you should have at least been able to give Denise one confessional.
Yeah, I'm on that same page. It's like such a kick in the balls that you are going to send a winner home with only one confessional, even or less than one confessional. When Sophie got voted out, she had one confessional that episode, and that's the episode Tony had 18. So it's like, I don't know. It just seems like Denise making it that far in the game to be the final six vote out 2.0, because final six technically happens twice with Natalie coming back in, and you don't even get a confessional on how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and all of these advantages being played at this first tribal council. It's just like advantage get in 2.0. It just feels bad for Denise, and I feel like there was more to say with her story. Honestly, she like barely got any screen time. I feel like she's just, oh, here, oh, she's at the bottom of the alliance, oh, she's friends with Kim. But it seems like her and Ben's relationship, like we saw this episode with Ben and Sarah having such a close relationship. In Ben's Ponderosa, he says his three closest friends on the island were Sarah, Denise, and Sophie, which for Sophie and Denise, I was like, WTF? Sort of like, I don't feel like we saw a lot of that. Denise was even saying in a post-game thing that she sort of thinks that her sharing the immunity idol with Adam was a thorn in her side, and she sort of wanted to not be aligned with Adam that early, and she was really, really close with Ben, and she would have wanted to keep the idol just between Ben and herself and not share it with Adam. And I just think that's so eye-opening, and it would have added a lot of thought for us, because when Ben and Sarah weren't willing to split the vote at the first tribal council to prevent all of these advantage get-in idols being played, I was like, why the heck would you not just split the vote and vote Denise out? But like, it's all of this relationship that we just didn't see.
Yeah, and I feel like we've been saying a lot during our Winners at War podcast that we wish Survivor episodes were longer, but also sometimes I feel like they show us strategy stuff we might not necessarily need to see, especially if it's just going to end up being all whispers at Tribal that decide things anyway. And it's like, I feel like I didn't even really understand how close Ben and Sarah were. Like, it just seemed like they were both Tony's underlings. And so it just, I wish that we could have gotten to see more relationship building this season, because so much of like people's story arcs were about like becoming better humans and not necessarily better Survivor players. And I think that like relationships are integral to who we are as people. And that kind of got ignored. And I feel like that also kind of goes back to the whole gender bias and Survivor thing, where like building personal relationships is something that like a lot of women focus more on. Like a lot of women are more on the side of, I really want to have a strong social game. And then if that's not the focus of the show in the editing, and that's not the focus of the show in the final tribal council, then you kind of get screwed. So
yeah, maybe it's something like showing people's social game or relationship. It's harder to show via television or via confessionals. But then I would argue that like the Ponderosa videos did a fine job of Denise just saying like, Ben was my number one ally, or Ben saying that he was closest to Sophie, Denise, and Sarah. Like, it's that easy to show some kind of relationship. And I think Ben's closeness to Sarah and Denise and their closeness to Tony definitely makes a lot of sense in why nobody was willing to vote Tony out of the game when they had the chance. And I think, that strong foursome, threesome relationship there really frustrated us as viewers and everyone else. Like when we were saying at Final 8, Final 7, like, why are the people like Ben who are on the bottom not willing to flip on the Tony Sarah duo? Because like, obviously us as viewers, we can see that, Ben is sort of on the bottom. He's probably not going to win. So why is he not flipping to vote out the people? Why is he not going to go work with Nick and Michelle and Jeremy and vote out the people who are the front runners for this game? And I think missing that relationship there really is detrimental to us as viewers. Like, that is why Ben and Denise never flipped on Tony, because they were so freaking close. And I just maybe it didn't come across in television. Like, I feel like I did not understand how close their relationship was until we saw Ben falling on his sword for Sarah this episode, until we saw all of this after game press come out.
Yeah, I feel like what's interesting though is that the only one who says she was really close to Tony is Sarah. Like, I almost feel like Ben and Denise stayed more in the alliance for Sarah than they did for Tony, which is another thing that's like questionable, because if it's true that Ben and Denise are closer to Sarah than they are to Tony, and the only reason they stayed in the alliance was for Sarah, then it's not really a case of Tony is the puppet master and Sarah is the underling. It's a case of Sarah is the one who's giving Tony the power he needs in order to be able to do the things he wanted to do. So, I don't know.
Which low-key, it did seem like that from people talking how close they are in their Ponderosa videos. Like, Ben was super close with Sarah, doesn't even mention Tony in his top 3 best friends list. And then Denise is super close to Ben and wish she never told Adam about the idol. So it's like those 3 have a close relationship. Then Sarah brings in Tony, and then Tony is in that foursome now. And I guess it's the magic of editing, honestly, that like you can edit anyone who wins the game or loses the game in any whatever light that you want based on you knowing the outcome of the game, which is very fascinating. So,
and yet you still end up with winners like Tommy, who are just so vanilla that you like. Anyways, I just
yo, he's a 3rd grade teacher, and we know nothing else besides that he's colorblind. 4th grade, yo, I don't even remember because it's just that.
It's just boring. But yeah, I think this season was so rich with relationships. And like you said, in Ponderosa, it ended up being like 6 videos at like 8 to 10 minutes a piece. So it's only like an hour of content. And I feel like I learned so much more about everyone's relationships on the Ponderosa videos than I did anytime else. And like people will post on their Instagram and it'll be like Kim and Parvati were close. And I never knew that. I don't think you ever knew that. And it's just like,
yeah,
knowing these social relationships is the underpinning of the strategic relationships.
And I think, speaking of Ponderosa videos real quick, if you all haven't seen it, definitely check it out on Survivor's YouTube channel. Total TV gold. And with the Ponderosa videos, I thought it was so interesting. Wendell, his edit throughout this season sort of makes no sense now, considering he wasn't the person to win the second Edge of Extinction challenge. We were thinking, okay, maybe he's the second winner, and then the Michelle versus Wendell ex-boyfriend-girlfriend relationship comes back to the forefront, and then they have to put their differences aside and work together in order to make it to the end. But, that didn't happen, and just Wendell's edit was just bad, seemingly for no reason, and villainous just because he's the merge boot. But in the Ponderosa videos, like him and Jeremy and Tyson are all joshing each other, and it's just so funny and so cool, and they're all just like fake fighting, but in such a like playful, quirky way that it was so funny to watch. And Wendell says that his closest friend that he made this season, like besides Jeremy and whatever, was Danny, which is like, what the heck? Where did that come from? They were on the Edge of Extinction, so that's probably where they became such close friends. But like, it's weird things like that is fascinating.
Especially because we saw Danny like twice after she got voted out. So, yikes.
Yeah, so going back to the game, speaking of Ben, I thought it was crazy in the episode when Ben was basically giving Sarah permission to vote him out. And I think after the episode and seeing how close Ben was to Sarah, it makes a lot of sense. And Ben's focus on making friends this season and being a better man, this move for Ben makes a lot of sense. And I think people are giving him a lot of slack for quitting the game, but I think it's more of Ben probably sees that he isn't going to win the game. It's a tricky situation. Yes, maybe the Tony, Sarah, Ben trio could vote for Michelle like they did, and then Michelle goes home, but maybe Natalie plays the idol for Michelle. It's sort of up in the air. And so I don't know. I think Ben doing that, if he was doing it because he wants to help his friend, which it seems like he truly wants to help Sarah win, and he thinks that Sarah has the better chances of winning, I don't think that you can say it's a quit, because like he's just playing his odds. He doesn't think he's going to win, so why take the spot from someone like Sarah who he thinks could have the chances to win the game, and do it for your friend?
It seems like the reason this was such a WTF moment was because we didn't really see this Ben Sarah relationship until this moment. And like it makes sense when Ben explains like we're really close. I wanted to come out of this game as friends because I guess it seemed like there was still a lot of animosity between Ben and basically everyone else on his season because he played like I would say a really aggressive game that hinged a lot on idols. But in the sense that like it makes sense for his story as a person, but also when you don't understand that he and Sarah are close, it's like, is he just giving up $2 million? Like that felt very strange. And like he said, money is better than friends are better than money. Whew, almost got that one really wrong. So I guess like that makes sense, but also just like the finale and the Ponderosa videos being posted made me wish so much more that they had like chosen to edit this season differently, because I think this season is still like good, but I think it could have been amazing if they focused on like the personal relationships between people and didn't just save that for the finale episode.
Yeah, and I think just that relationship we didn't really see. I was like, oh, I didn't know they were that close to be able to like get them to vote you out. So like you're helping your friend win the game. But I think saying that also parallels to Tyson's tweet of saying like, you want your friend to win the game in Natalie versus an acquaintance that you never met really before, you never talked to before. So I think, it really does go to show Ben's character that he would rather have someone that he really likes in his friend Sarah go further in the game rather than Ben trying to be like the final three loser or just trying to go to final three for the larger paycheck. Because I feel like in normal seasons of Survivor with rookies or first-time players, a lot of people seemingly at the end of the game will just try to get to the end of the game in whatever way possible to be a loser at final three so they can get like whatever 100K for being second place, third place. So, but I guess you can also say that if you aren't in final three, that you can never have a chance to argue in front of the jury. So you want to make final three whatever way possible. I just think that like it's sort of honorable, he knows he's not going to win, so might as well help your friend out.
Yeah. So I think as a move, it had less power since he gave Sarah permission to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I think if Sarah had been strong enough in her relationship with Ben that she knew that he would not hold hard feelings against her, and then done it without telling Ben and without telling Tony, that would make her seem more of like the willing to make big moves that people seem to want out of the winner. And so, and moreover, she would have done it without Tony. But it's like if someone gives you permission to make a move and then you make that move, how is that any different from Tony telling you to make a move? So I feel like in the long run, it doesn't matter since Sarah didn't get to the final three. But I think if Sarah had gotten to the final three, I'm not sure how much that move would have helped her.
Yeah, unless like she and Ben in Ponderosa didn't tell anyone that they gave each other permission, he gave her permission to vote him out, and then you kept it under wraps, and then Sarah could play it up in a way that it was a big move. I think being results oriented, I'm not sure if voting Ben out here is a good move. I mean, I think it is risky if you are Sarah and you do the Sarah, Ben, Tony trio and you put it all on Michelle, and then Natalie has the correct read and then she does play her idol for Michelle, and then I guess Ben still goes home anyways, because I think it was interesting that in the post-game press it was saying that Tony had made 2 fake idols. So Nick thought Tony had 2 fake idols. That's why Nick didn't want to vote Tony out at first and wanted to work with Tony, because Tony seemingly had power because he had 2 idols. And then also Sarah had a fake idol. I think Tony made Sarah a fake idol. So that's why it got the votes off of Sarah. And that's why Michelle and Natalie voted for Ben this time, because for all of the people like Sarah, for Michelle, for Natalie, I think it doesn't really make sense to vote Ben out here, because you sort of want to bring Ben into the next round so then Ben can beat Tony at Fire. They were all afraid Sarah has an idol too. Maybe Sarah plays it and then one of us get idled out. So that's why they put their votes on Ben. And then Tony was safe, obviously, thank God, because he won immunity that round. But I just think, I don't know, it just sort of tricky with not many people left, but you're bringing people to the end who can't beat Tony in Fire. And they were saying like, oh, we don't want Ben going to Fire because he would beat us at Fire, but also on the other end of that spectrum, Ben could also probably beat Tony at Fire.
Yeah, so
yep. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it didn't happen in the game, so like it was something that they thought about, but being results oriented, maybe voting Ben out here wasn't the best move. And maybe keeping Ben and then voting Michelle out here, it would be Natalie versus the 3 in Ben, Sarah, and Tony. And then say Natalie still wins individual immunity, then she could put Ben and Tony to Fire. Then maybe Ben wins Fire, and then Ben, Sarah, and Natalie go to final 3. Or even when you have a 3-1 split of the Tony threesome and the Natalie group, maybe Natalie doesn't win final immunity. Say any one of the threesome win final immunity, you stick Ben in there versus Natalie, and then maybe Ben can still win, and then you still make it to final 3. I think this was a pivotal point for Sarah not making it to final 3, and that's when we see Natalie choose Sarah and Tony to go to Fire, which, do you think that's a good or bad move, Alyssa?
I've been thinking about this a lot because I understand why Natalie chose Michelle to come with her, because I think it's like Michelle was basically her only alliance in the game since she came back to the threesome, Denise and Michelle. And so it's like she couldn't really have an ally other than Michelle. And so I think it would look kind of like scummy for her not to bring Michelle. But I also think that between Sarah and Michelle had a better chance of beating Tony at Fire. And I think we kind of saw that when they did the whole like fire making montage at camp where Michelle was doing really well. And I think that was kind of, it almost seemed like that was made to make us think that Natalie should have chosen Michelle against Tony for Fire. And like, I don't know. I think it was really nice for both Sarah and Tony's stories to end against each other. And so I think that also would have hurt Natalie no matter which one of them won as far as her own final 3 chances, because you basically just handed them a gold-plated like invitation to the end, an invitation to become winner. I think it's hard because unless you put yourself in the Fire challenge, you're basically giving someone else like the final like icing on the cake of their game. And so like I respect that Natalie was able to say, I don't think I can win this challenge and I would rather get to the final 3 than essentially vote myself out. But I don't know, just because is it better to lose at final 4 or to bring yourself to final 3 knowing you're not going to be able to win because you didn't give yourself that hero moment? And I think it's also hard because Natalie was immune both times she went to tribal, because she had immunity necklace at final 6 and then an idol for final 5. Either way,
an idol both times.
Idol both times, right, because Michelle was immune. But anyway, since she never was able to be voted out, it just seemed kind of weird that she didn't put herself on the line in order to make herself a better story. Especially because she also must have known that the fire challenge was happening. So it's like, you can practice fire too. Like, Sarah and Tony both didn't start at good levels for making fire. So if you're even a little bit better than them and you have the confidence, then
yeah, I agree with you. It definitely, like we've seen in every single season since Heroes, Healers, Hustlers, that the person who has won the fire challenge ends up going on to win the game, besides last season with Tommy and then Dean winning fire. But that's an anomaly. From all of the other seasons that we've seen, whoever wins fire goes on to win the game. So definitely winning fire is a huge capstone, I think, right in front of the jury versus like, oh yeah, Tony won 4 immunity challenges. Nobody else saw how hard the immunity challenges were, how grueling they were, how long they took. Like, sure, you can say it at tribal council, but fire is something where those 16 people, 15 people, I guess, because Sarah wasn't out yet, on the jury could actually visualize and see you fight for your life. And so that is the question. Like, do you put yourself into fire and be the 4th place loser, or do you go and set yourself up in a way that you're a final tribal council loser by letting the person who everyone needs to get voted out, like a Rick Devens, like a Wendell in Ghost Island, or like a Tony in this season, where the person that needs to get voted out somehow wins fire and then makes it to final 3. So I think that's something that you do have to balance. I think Natalie not choosing Michelle, Natalie in post-game stuff was saying it was because Michelle was crying at tribal council, so she didn't think Michelle was in the right headspace to beat Tony at fire. I also think maybe not putting Michelle in is smarter for Natalie, because I feel like Natalie and Michelle are fighting for a lot of the same votes on the jury, like Jeremy, like an Adam, like Parvati. They're all close with similar people. So Natalie giving Michelle that opportunity to beat Tony and get the biggest threat out of the game in fire. And Michelle seemed up for it. You know, she wasn't backing down. She wasn't scared from doing it. And so that would give Michelle such a good ending to her Survivor story that maybe wouldn't have been the best for Natalie. So I think not putting Michelle in makes sense. I think it was interesting on Rob Has a Podcast on Wednesday night. They were saying something along the lines of, did Chris Underwood playing the perfect game when he came back from the Edge of Extinction actually make it more difficult for any other final 6 Edge of Extinction returnee, because Chris Underwood set the bar so high? And we saw it at Final Tribal Council, where Rob was saying that he wished Natalie put herself into fire. And I think, honestly, for Natalie, having 2 immunity idols, being safe every single tribal council that she went to, and the only one she wasn't safe at was the one she was voted out, I feel like she should have put herself into fire, because either you lose fire in your 4th place, or you win fire and you're maybe winning the game against Sarah and Michelle. We can talk about that after the fire challenge and everything, but I don't know. I think it's really, really tricky. Maybe I think Natalie was thinking that she had the votes to win against Tony, and that's what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast. So I guess it makes sense for Natalie not to put herself in, because she thought she had the votes to win against Tony.
I think part of it is also, we don't see people's, like, we haven't seen someone fail at the Final 4 fire challenge, in the sense that, like, someone puts themselves in and they lose. Because Dominic put himself in and he won. Ben was put in, or he won the fire challenge, I guess I should say. He lost the game. But even that, he tied with Wendell. And the only reason that Wendell won was because he was closer with Laurel. And then Ben was put into fire and he won. Chris Underwood put himself into fire and he won. So it's like, I don't know. We haven't seen someone put themselves into fire and lose that fire, I guess, is the simplest way to do it. I guess when it wasn't Dom who did fire, it was Wendell who did fire, and he ended up winning the game. So it's like, we haven't seen someone put themselves in fire and lose the game. because they put themselves in fire. So
yeah, I guess the only precedent that we have is Chris putting himself in, but he beats Rick, and then everyone else besides Tommy went into fire, and whoever won the fire challenge won the game. I think we can definitely do a whole other video based on this Final Four fire making challenge twist, because I personally am not a fan of it. So I think something has to change. You can't have people like we have harped on last week, the week before, basically safe from Final 6 to Final 3, having a free ride in there. I think if you're keeping Final 4 fire, you need to have a Final 2 final tribal council, because you need another vote in there where you have to do the social dynamicing and then strategizing to vote someone out. I think just Natalie being safe from 6 to 3 is just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that.
yeah, it's just like you want to have a vote wherein people have to use strategy or an immunity necklace in order to be able to win. And even the immunity necklace, I feel like kind of feels cheap to win the game. Like if you were gonna be voted out and then you won immunity the one time you needed to. Like
Yeah, so we see Tony and Sarah go to fire, and this might have not been the best outcome for Natalie and Michelle, because I think sending Sarah in, you get one half of Cops Are Us coming back into the game, which is sort of risky. And I think maybe if you went to the end with Sarah and Tony, they split the votes, and maybe the third person there, whether it is Nat, or I guess it would be Natalie because she won the final immunity challenge, maybe Natalie gets the most votes there because those two split votes could be another option. I just think the Sarah Tony Fire Challenge, even though it wasn't a good option for some people, honestly, this was the ending of the Cops Are Us alliance that we needed to see. Like, sort of 3 seasons, sort of not 3 seasons. This has been building up, and to see this and how it ends with all of them, both of them crying and them hugging each other, and like this is the way that one of them goes home and then the other one goes on to win the game, is just so mind-blowing. It's honestly such a cool moment, and I think it'll be one of those moments that definitely goes down in Survivor history just because it has so much backstory and meaning behind it.
Yeah, I think that is definitely true in the sense that like it was a nice way to end both of their stories, especially because I can't see either of them wanting to come back again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the point with this, though, that I would like to make is that Natalie in post-game stuff was saying that she thought the whole Sarah Tony crying was all a faking it for the jury, and then so she was really annoyed that they would put on such a show. And I don't know, I didn't really like that comment. I guess it is perception and you think it's faking or not, but like, I don't know. As a viewer, knowing that it's heartfelt and it wasn't faking, it just sort of comes off with a bad taste in my mouth.
We don't know that they weren't faking. They never said that they were faking, but that doesn't mean anything. So,
yeah, it just seems like, they weren't faking, and this was a good end to their Cops Are Us alliance relationship. And I feel like that's how I would like to think about it if they were trying to play it up. I mean, honestly, that would be a good move, because I was like, oh my God, this is so sad while watching it. I was going to cry. Like, if they were playing it up, that is a good move.
yeah. So, I guess I made a comment that I think opens a can of worms, which is that I don't think that Sarah and Tony are going to come back again. And I guess I want to know if you think anyone this season would play again or would be invited back again. And I feel like for me, this list is very, very short.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the old school players are all not going to ever come back again. It seems like all of the older players, so all of the legends of Survivor that we've all grown up with, like the Boston Rob, Parvati, Tyson, Sandra, are not going to be coming back. On Instagram Live or some interview with ET Canada, Parvati said that she would come back in a coaching capacity similar to Island of the Idols, which I'm like, oh yeah, like I would like to see that. Her and Tyson, she was saying, would be good coaches. But then also I was like, oh, another Island of the Idols. I'm not sure if I would want to see that, but I would just want to see like the old school alliance have more Ponderosa or YouTube videos, or like have some kind of spin-off show would be super fun. So I don't think all of them are going to be coming back, which is really sad because that is what makes Survivor Season 40 so monumentous. I could honestly see maybe someone like Sophie coming back, and those younger players, Adam would say yes if he was invited back. Sophie, same thing. I think, yeah, any of the younger players like Wendell, Adam, Nick, Sophie, if they were invited back, I think they'd play again.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would love for the old school players is how an Island of the Idols, Rob and Sandra had their little booth that they could listen to tribal council in. Like, I would just want an entire like second jury full of old school players listening in on every tribal council, just because I feel like that would be hilarious. But yeah, I think like Ethan, Parvati, Rob, Amber, Danny, probably even Yule wouldn't come back. Tyson probably isn't coming back. I think Kim said she wouldn't come back. Jeremy has played 3 times now, and I feel like most of the time they only invite like really, really strong players back for a 4th time. So I don't think he would be invited back or even want to come back. Denise probably wouldn't come back just because she's getting old now. So I don't know. I'm not sure Ben would come back either because I feel like Ben wanted like a resolution to his first season, and I think he got that this time. And I don't think he would come back again, especially because winning his first time and getting Final 5 his second time, like that's a really good performance. And I think it would put a target on his back if he ever played for a 3rd time. Because I think also one of the reasons Tony was able to do well, I think, is because he flamed out so spectacularly in Game Changers. Because it's like a lot of the winners only played once, which was the time they won, or they played more than once, but they didn't do as well, like the second time, or their first time they didn't do as well, and then they won, blah, 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 blah. So I think that's definitely worth looking at. I'm not sure Sarah would play again. Again, I don't think she's good enough to warrant a 4th play. Like, I feel mean saying that, but I feel like the people that they brought back for a 4th time, it was just Rob, Parvati, Tyson, who have been back 4 times, correct?
What, Ozzy, Sari?
Oh, yeah, Ozzy and Sari. And I feel like Ozzy's 4th time back was kind of controversial, too. So I feel like Sarah and Jeremy like are good Survivor players, but they're not legend status the way that like Rob, Parv, Sari, and then whoever else I just said are. So
yeah, I think all the people with families probably know, unless like the prize money is 4 million or something that makes it worthwhile to go starve on the island for a month and a half. So that's why I was thinking a lot of the younger players would come again if it's like good in their life.
I'm not sure if some people would come back if they were invited, or I'm not sure if some people would be invited back, I guess would be a more accurate way of saying it. Because I feel like Nick, like his win wasn't super spectacular, and then his second performance wasn't that great either.
No, and everyone on Reddit loves Nick now. It's honestly so funny. People have just been like memeing the hell out of Nick, and then someone even edited a whole tribal council of just like everyone in the tribal council is Nick, and that Nick votes Nick out of the game. So now it's sort of like a running joke, and people are making Mount Rushmores of 4 Nicks, and then everyone in the comments are like fighting like, no, that Nick shouldn't be on the Mount Rushmore because the other Nick should be on the Mount Rushmore. So I don't know. It's more like a meme thing. I agree that I feel like some people might not be invited back. I also feel like you have to play the next season that you're invited back on. It has to be like a legend season or some kind of season where the cast is stacked, because if you're going into another season, like if Sophie goes into a Game Changers 2 season, I think Sophie goes out early because she doesn't have that element of surprise that she had this season, from being like 21, 22 playing the first time to being 28, 29 this time. She doesn't have that surprise, but now everyone knows that she's a bomb ass player and that she can dominate puzzles and dominate the social strategic moves in the game. So I honestly feel like if these winners are coming back, and especially the more dominant viewed winners, they have to come back on a season that has equally dominant players. Otherwise, it's just going to be another like game changers kind of like good people go first.
Or like the season where they had the 4 returnees and then 3 returnees. I don't even remember the season anymore, but like
that was the Edge of Extinction.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I like legit all of the seasons run together in my head now. But like Edge of Extinction, none of them really had a chance, I feel like, of winning. So yeah, I think most of these winners seem satisfied with their story.
Yeah.
And I think also with the idea of this marking the end of an era, like you want to give new Survivor players the time to shine. You don't want every like top winners list to just be people from like the first 20 or 30 seasons of Survivor. So I think that like kind of doing a soft reset and not inviting back a lot of old winners anymore will be a good thing.
Yeah, like let's let some of these newer winners start to maybe marinate enough that they begin to become legend status. Let's have a second chances 2.0. I would love to see that. There are a lot of people that I think have a ton of potential to come back and honestly become great players or great winners, similar to like a Kelly Wentworth-esque style person that can come back. So like that's something that I would be so freaking down to see. It's just so sad that like Survivor, they say that they want to have a fall season, but like realistically, it seems like 2021 might be when we're going to have Survivor again. And I just like in the finale, when Jeff was like 16-year-olds apply, I really hope it was under the understanding that 16-year-olds, by the time that they get to season 43, 44, will be turning 18, and not the fact that they're actually going to let minors play, because I just think that is so bad on so many levels. Lawsuits, inappropriateness.
I think also like even letting like 18 and 19-year-olds play seems to be kind of controversial because it's like Will wasn't that great, Julia wasn't that great. The youngest winner was Fabio. He was 21 when he won, and he basically only won because he was a challenge beast the whole time. So I feel like younger players, like, you need life experience in order to be able to like do well on Survivor. Like that was one thing I think they really touched on in Ponderosa, was the fact that like you need to know yourself before you play Survivor, because Survivor like makes you question a lot of things about yourself. Like, am I a good person? Can I trust people in my life? And so I think that like doing that when you don't already have a strong sense of self could be very like traumatic. So
yeah, I think like 18-year-olds are sort of less compelling television. I don't see an 18-year-old running an alliance. Like they're not going to be the top dog in an alliance bossing 40-year-olds around. Like no way. That is never going to happen. I just think I hope they're waiting till 18 and not letting 16-year-old like pre-puberty children out there. I just got so angry when they said that for no real reason. I just think it opens such a can of worms of so many bad things that could happen to these kids on the island. And we saw it, like you were saying, this season, where people have trust issues. People can't talk to their partner because they have trust issues. People have like serious mental health problems that they can't go back into the real world successfully for a long time. And it's like, you can't put a 16-year-old out there, even if you have waivers, and like you all are half naked all the time. Like you can't, I don't know. It's like really inappropriate.
Especially because it's like if their top comes off in like in one of the challenges, that's now child pornography. So like
I'm just like, I am so peeved. I really hope there is no 16-year-olds on Survivor. It's just
like
so
I
bad.
wondered if it was like supposed to be one of those things where it's like apply when you're 16 and then by the time you're 18 we'll recognize your face, because a lot of people like have to apply more than once in order to be able to win. So
then I'm like, what kind of 16-year-old storyline are you going to be saying in your interview,
I'm
like,
just
oh,
doing
yo,
this for my college applications.
like, I'm a varsity or junior varsity athlete in high school. I scored 5s on my AP exams. Like, I'm in my student government. Let me on Survivor. I'm like, that is
Yeah.
not compelling television.
Yeah. So I think the future of Survivor is gonna be interesting to see. I really hope that they kind of dial back some of the advantage getting stuff. I hope that like they can continue to find players who are like as amazing as this generation of Survivor players, just because I really love this show and I want it to keep going for a long time.
Yeah, and so we have a indefinite hiatus coming up now. So definitely let us know in the comments down below what kind of videos that you want to see us do during this off season. If Alyssa and I can get together, we can totally try to do some more DIY challenge videos because I don't know, I honestly miss doing those because those are a lot of fun. But yeah, thank you all so much for commenting along with us in the chat. We had a lot of participation, which is always super, super cool to see. But we will see you all next week with a Survivor-related video. So thank you all so much for watching. Definitely let us know what you thought of the finale down below, and we'll see you all next time.